I want to move into a little bit of shared use mobility center information. We were founded in 2014. We are a nonprofit. We always work in the public interest, and we've really grown and changed as this field and industry has grown. And our work has and continues to be, though, always with the public interest vision for a multimodal transportation system anchored by a strong transit system, on-demand, shared mobility services connected together. And we're looking for something, we've always been looking for something flexible, resilient, with a lot of options and choice, which clearly is becoming an even more important way for the future. We've also always underpinned this work with two big concepts. One is the need to address the big gap between the haves and the have-nots, and how that manifests itself with access to safe, affordable, and clean transportation. And we've married that concept with the concerns about the big looming destruction of our planet through environmental degradation and increasing climate change. And as I'm sure most all of you know, transportation has risen to be the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions, and we've made addressing that a more and more central part of our work. So like the summit does, and we're trying to do virtually now, we've always wanted to be a table to bring together diverse interests. We've built a network of public sector, private sector, civic groups, and this work has resulted, sometimes through the summit itself, in the development of new partnerships, the acceleration of change in public institutions, and the creation of this multimodal community that's working hard to create mobility for all. Our relationships cover every state and many countries, and we have very extensive network. And now at this critical juncture, we really want to harness that network to see how we can be more engaged in policy change to move forward a positive agenda. So with a global pandemic sweeping the world and laying bare the inequities and exposing the limitations that we've all seen to our resilience and flexibility, we're really here in this summit at a very unprecedented moment. And we know, it's easy to despair, and we heard a lot yesterday about all the transit ridership that has plummeted, about, movement toward single occupancy vehicles. And we know that a lot of the shared mobility companies are struggling and laying off staff. And of course, we all face these real issues around safety. So, but I wanted to say we also see encouraging signs in other countries, and some of this got talked about yesterday, some of it will be talked about today. Paris, where they're spending millions of dollars adding bike lanes. Milan, where they're closing their city center to cars. A number of these places looking to produce the tools to fight climate change so that they can create the economic growth we're going to need to jumpstart the economy. So using it really in a positive way to get the economy moving. In the US, some cities are reallocating street space for pedestrians and bikes, moving ahead to expand active transportation. But how do we accelerate this kind of work? How do we do this when we're all scared and isolated? What are the business models of the future that can work? What will these partnerships actually look like? How will we promote the public good? And who will we work with? How will we engage communities and the public to create safe, affordable, and environmentally sound solutions? Yesterday, we started the conversation, and in the breakouts, we talked about a lot of specific ideas. Today, we will continue that conversation. This summit is really about how we take advantage of this terrible moment and find a way to use it to make positive change and lasting change. How do we make the new normal a better normal? So the Shared Mobility Center, we're committed to using our expertise at supporting pilot projects, our analytic chops in research, our reach to diverse parties to help move this conversation through policy and programs. And while California leads the way in many of these things, we are also working across the country with the Federal Transit Administration, with local transit, with city agencies, with a lot of you in this virtual room. Our work with the California Air Resources Board is some of the most rewarding and exemplary work that we are doing and have done, because it involves finding the appropriate solutions to address the needs of grassroots groups, cities, transit agencies in rural California, as well as Los Angeles and the Bay Area, and creating new partnerships in the most disadvantaged communities. The Clean Mobility Options Program, voucher pilot program, which is now funded at $20 million, will provide resources to disadvantaged communities and tribal areas to create new forms of mobility and access to jobs and opportunity that are safe and environmentally sound. And this program is kicking off very soon, in the next month. And this program and others like it are the type of initiatives that can accelerate the kind of change we are seeking. And with that as a backdrop, I would like to introduce Mary Nichols, who is the chair of the California Air Resources Board. Mary is an environmental lawyer and a leader who has spent her career working really to save our planet. At first, or I don't know the order of this, but she was at the Natural Resources Defense Council, she was at the EPA, and now she's at the Air Resources Board. And Mary has played a key role in California and the nation's progress toward healthy air. She's a fighter, and she has led the board in crafting California's internationally recognized climate action plan. So Mary's gonna talk with us about this work and how she views it in light of the pandemic and what we need to think about going forward. So thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Sharon, for that warm introduction, and welcome to everyone who's tuning in from across the country. I want to congratulate you and your team for having adapted to successfully move this summit into a virtual gathering on pretty short notice, and having assembled so many leading thinkers, policymakers, and practitioners of clean, efficient, and sustainable transportation and mobility services. This summit is, I think, an excellent example of how we can dramatically change the ways we engage and connect with each other. The current crisis, as we all know, is taking a devastating toll on both our economy and the public health. But as we look towards the future, it also affords us, as you've indicated, the opportunity to rethink and reinvent the ways we move ourselves and all of our stuff and the services that we use to power our economy. The transportation sector is the largest source of GHG emissions in the US, as well as in California. It accounts for more than 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions. And as important to us historically, it also constitutes the overwhelming majority of harmful air pollutants that harm public health. So we know that we can't achieve our climate and public health goals going the way we're going today, that we have to slash transportation emissions. And we're also learning from the growing body of research that areas with chronic pollution are linked with higher COVID-related mortality. And we assume that COVID isn't the only virus or other uh, potential pandemic that bears that same kind of relationship. So now more than ever, we have to move to a cleaner, more efficient transportation system. And we need a multi-pronged effort that includes replacing the dirty engines that are out there today with cleaner zero emission technologies, and one that gives people better, cleaner, and healthier mobility options. We need the cars and trucks and buses and trains to be cleaner and rapidly moving towards zero emission. And that means that automakers will have to supply lower and near zero emissions and zero emission vehicles for all the full array of light, medium, and heavy duty applications. It also means that we're going to need to continue to provide incentives for consumers to buy and access zero emission vehicles, including in the secondary markets and disadvantaged communities. And what better time to be doing that when interest rates on loans are zero? It simply is an opportunity that's lying out there for a stimulus package. It also means we have to invest in the infrastructure to support the transition to a zero emission transportation system for passenger vehicles and big rigs alike. With the right set of policies, regulations, incentives, and investments, we can be close to a fully zero emission passenger vehicle fleet in California, we believe, by the end of this decade. It's a, it's a steep climb, but it can be done. We also must continue to drive down vehicle miles traveled by expanding a whole range of clean, affordable, and accessible mobility options. We've already begun to evaluate the impacts of the current drop in vehicle miles traveled that we've seen over the past number of weeks as so much of our economy has shut down. In Los Angeles, where I live, where I'm speaking to you from, the vehicle miles traveled dropped by nearly 75% at one point, and in other parts of the state, we have witnessed reductions of nearly 90%. This is simply unimaginable a year ago. Active transportation has increased in some areas, while at the same time, we've seen dramatic reductions in the amount of transit ridership and ride sharing. Totally predictable, but a new reality that we have to deal with. We've also learned that teleworking and remote education can be effective alternatives for many, but not all people. There are some jobs that are not going to be conducive to these kinds of changes in the working arrangements. So as we look to reboot our economy, we need to take what we're learning from the current situation and use it to support the scaling up of a transportation system that maximizes clean, affordable, and accessible mobility options. And to all of you who are here today, I just want to urge that small incremental investments in doing the right thing is not enough to offset what's built in already to the current system. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. Different solutions will work for different communities, but we know that there are tremendous public health, climate, and economic benefits that come with expanded clean transportation, as well as offering people more options. So what better time to start to address this with bigger, bolder proposals? In California, through programs like our Sustainable Communities Strategy, we're providing communities with financial incentives to promote housing and job growth, in areas with accessible mobility alternatives, including transit, but also car sharing, walking, and biking. And at the California Resources Board, we're working on a clean miles standard that will help to ensure that transportation network companies maximize zero emission miles traveled. They are clearly part of the solution, but we've got to come up with a workable way to make sure that those vehicles are not contributing to more of the same old problems. And with partners, including the Shared Use Mobility Center, we have invested millions of dollars from our state's cap and trade system in an innovative clean mobility options for disadvantaged communities program. That's a mouthful. That will create new opportunities for zero emissions car, bike, and ride sharing services in some of the most heavily burdened communities in our state. So while our focus has to remain on keeping people safe and healthy during the current crisis, now is exactly the time to begin thinking about how to most effectively kickstart our economy. We know there are lots of ideas out there. We certainly have to make sure that we are packaging them in ways that can make sense politically and give people the opportunity to craft regional solutions, but at the same time to recognize that we just cannot put public money, or hopefully not be encouraging private money to go into things that are taking us in the wrong direction. We have a massive opportunity in front of us. We shouldn't blow it as we move out of this crisis to build a new transportation paradigm. So it's going to require efforts at all levels and across industry as well as the private sector. But we know that meeting the goals that we all share for a healthy and sustainable climate and communities are going to require it. And we also know that there's money to be made from investing in sustainable transportation and mobility choices and good jobs out there for people who are, in many cases, currently wondering what their future is going to hold. Building a clean transportation system should be at the heart of our country's actions to stimulate the economy going forward. I encourage you to persist, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Oops. Hello. Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you for that inspiring talk and for telling us more about how California is going about making the change that we need. And we just all have to hang in there and work together going forward in this very challenging time. You know, one of the things at this summit overall is there's like a spirit of hope and a path toward the future, which sometimes when we're all sitting in our homes, it's, you know, it's easy to lose sight of that. So thank you very much for your
Thank you.
for your talk.